Steve, she's kind of on the set right now.
Welcome to Space Cities. I'm your host, Patrick Bailey. Space Cities is a TV program about astronomy, scientific exploration of space, and scientific phenomena. And today we have a very special guest and a very special program with Michael Horn. He is the authorized U.S. media representative of the Billy Meier UFO case in America. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I imagine some of our viewers don't know that UFOs was one of the top searched areas on the internet, and everyone's looking for good quality photos of UFOs, and many people may not be acquainted with your particular Billy Meier case. So why don't we start with a summary of what is Billy Meier, what is his case, and how are you involved?
Sure. Billy Meier is a now 81-year-old man. He lives in Switzerland. He grew up in Switzerland and has traveled extensively in many places. We'll start there, and I mean terrestrially and otherwise. And Meier is the person who has produced the clearest, most abundant UFO evidence ever. And he, strangely enough, doesn't have the worldwide visibility yet, considering that this is, in my opinion, the most authentic and singularly authentic UFO case, a contact case, meaning that extraterrestrial human beings have been in contact with this man since he was a 5-year-old boy.
5 years old?
Yeah.
Well, what time period would that be? 1960s?
Oh, no. He was born in 1937, so his first contacts were 1942 and have continued to this day.
Wow.
And oftentimes I say, according to the information in the case, and I only do that when it's about something that I can't say we have been able to prove or disprove about the case. So otherwise, when I state things about the evidence and about the man, it's information that people can verify for themselves.
Okay, well, in most UFO cases that I'm acquainted with, we have the report of the individual with maybe some pictures of lights in the sky. So how does the Billy Meier case differ?
Well, I think that one of the most remarkable things is that with all of this interest in UFOs, we rarely have the question asked or the proposition raised that the confirmed existence of actual intelligent space-traveling extraterrestrials would be the most important discovery, most important scientific discovery in all of human history, exceeded only by confirmed contact with such beings. This is never discussed in ufology. Everybody's chasing the lights in the sky that you spoke about. And as you also, basically indicate, virtually all of the claims are anecdotal. And while people have seen things in the sky, and of course, and even photographed or filmed things in the sky, it's all absent absolutely firm proof of an extraterrestrial origin or manufacture, with the exception of the Billy Meier case.
Okay, if we're talking about ETs, most people think about small grays, Nordics, grasshoppers. What did Billy Meier see?
Well, unlike all of these either imaginary or deliberately disinformed forms that people have created to mislead people, Billy Meier meets with human beings from another star system that are basically indistinguishable for the most part from terrestrial human beings. So it's not anything like, you know, the weird little creatures of science fiction. His first contact person was named Svath. Meier claims that he met him when he was 5 years old, and he was an elderly-looking man, very similar to anybody we would, you know, see on Earth, any elderly gentleman on Earth. And Meier met with him for 11 years.
11 years.
Mm-hmm.
Did he say how old he was?
He was over 900 years old, according to the information in the case.
Wow, different environment.
A kind of age span that we will eventually also regain for ourselves. Is kind of a birthright long delayed.
Okay, well, hopefully we have the maturity to reach that age without blowing ourselves up first.
Very much the subject of what we're going to get into tonight.
Later tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and walk us through some of the slides that you have.
Sure. Well, you know, we mentioned that his first contact person was a man named Svath, and actually Meier's first evidence didn't occur until 1964, but that's still extraordinarily early in all of ufology for really clear photographs of UFOs to be presented and to have been witnessed by other people who are still living. So when we see these photographs from India from 1964, we're seeing actually tremendous evidence. And the craft that we see in these photographs, the solitary craft especially, is piloted by a woman named Asket, we're told, who was Meier's second teacher. Long hair, slender statured woman. She has been in Billy Meier's life well, for over many, many years. She has appeared and reappeared for various reasons, but it was during this 11-year period that he interacted with her, traveled with her in her craft. It is said that she was taking him also back in time on a couple of occasions. It's a little much to get into right now, but those photographs were extremely important in terms of establishing the credibility of the case. So when we look at photographs such as this again, some of them are sepia tone, some of them come out more clearly in black and white. We are looking at the first evidence taken in India, 1964, at the Ashoka ashram, a Buddhist ashram. A little close-up of one of the craft done by an enlargement, not with the camera, because Meier's camera was an extremely primitive Kodak bellows camera circa 1943. There it is for us to look at. My father had one of those. They were very funny little cameras, and you could barely do anything more but take a nice black and white photo with it. So this is part of the most important evidence. It is foundational. In this photograph, we see what we're used to seeing, lights in the sky, and in the lower right, the foreground, there is a woman who's looking also at the objects. This woman was someone who was connected to the ashram as well. And that is, you know, the 8 craft of Asket and her people there. And then when we move on to look, you know, at other photos and consider what is connected to this 1964 experience, we're going to find that this is seminal. This is crucial to establishing the singular authenticity of the Meier case. And if we look at some more images from around this time, perhaps we also have this very, very perplexing but remarkable photograph. We see in the left center a figure of a man. That's Billy Meier sitting on the ground in India. There's a spire behind his head from the ashram, and in the sky above his head is a hologram projected by Asket of a white cross in the sky. I was right there when this filming was done of Meier's photo book, and I can tell you that is in the photograph. It's not white tape, it's not paint or anything else. The clouds actually are partially in front of the top of the cross, and it is a very unusual thing to look at.
Photoshop?
Impossible, since it didn't exist. Now, I know we have some other slides pertaining to this time as well. And in the, there's a newspaper article that was written about Meier. In the paper, it was called The Statesman, and at the time, that paper had been in existence for over 100 years. It still exists, and it's a very reputable paper. It's not like, you know, a tabloid or a sensationalized paper. This is one of the few times, I'm sure, that they've covered something this unusual. And the reporter who wrote this was a very reputable reporter, and he describes seeing an album with 80 UFO photos in 1964. And Meier's a vagabond traveling around in the middle of India. He described that photo with the cross, so we know that's not something that was, you know, recent at all. That was present for this reporter to see at the time as well.
1964.
Mm-hmm. Meier was 27 at the time. And last year, I was contacted on a Saturday morning, I think it was in mid-January in 2017, by someone I'd never heard from before, a man who said his name was Joe. And Joe only would tell me that he was an investigator. And he was a very interesting fellow. He was the, as he told me, he was the former top case supervisor for the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. That is yeah, that's you probably know, they protect national security for the United States, and he did his work primarily during the years of 1967 to 71. He personally supervised and vetted hundreds and hundreds of different people who were aspiring to high position or who were aspiring to higher office, people who could end up with their finger on the nuclear trigger. He was involved in ferreting out moles and spies, and this is what he was telling me at the time. And then he said, you don't have to take my word for it. He emailed me documents, and I saw all this stuff with all the official seals and names of people, and Joe was the real deal. So he said, look, I've heard about your Billy Meier case. I think it could be a hoax. I said, okay. He said, you're willing to talk about it? I said, I am. So for about 3 months, we went back and forth. He would call like clockwork, 8:30 every Saturday morning. And about at the end of the third month or so, something was irritating him. He didn't want to talk to me anymore. It was fine. But then 5 months later, in August, late August, I believe it was, I get a call, 8:30 Saturday morning. It's me, Joe. Joe's a very crusty kind of a guy, intense guy. And he said he's still willing to talk to me. And I said, yeah, Joe, of course, this is what I do. I love doing it. Talk to anybody. Doesn't matter. I'm not here to convince you, but I'll try to answer questions. He says, well, first let me tell you who I am. And then he fills me in on all this stuff because he didn't tell me off the bat that he was, you know, he's not a UFO investigator. He's a real investigator. Mm-hmm. He's a military investigator. And when you are any kind of an official investigator, police, you know, detective, any kind of forensic investigation and all, military, of course, you have to follow certain operating procedures, standards, things like means, motive, and opportunity that have to accord, have to make sense. So Joe said, having filled me in on all this, he said, you want to know about your Billy Meier case? And I thought, okay, here it comes. I said, yes, Joe, you know, give it to me. He said, it's 100% ironclad authentic.
Ironclad.
Ironclad.
He was convinced.
He said, there's no doubt about it. I'll tell you why, he said. And he said, look, that India information, I looked into all of that. Yep, that paper exists. That's a real article. You mentioned in your presentation and documentation this woman, Pobol Cheng. She had been a child, a granddaughter of the head monk at the ashram. He says, I looked her up. She was a UN diplomat. That's true. She was in the, you know, the service of her country, Cambodia, for a dozen years. He said, there's no reason this woman should have come forward publicly and stand at a lectern and talk about this case and her witnessing, being an eyewitness, along with 100 other people at the ashram who saw the objects. And he said, look, she's solid, she's credible. And you put all that together, and unless somebody can prove to me that Billy Meier obtained those photographs, those UFO photographs, in any means other than having taken them himself, then I'm telling you right now. And then he said, I'll take on any skeptics that come at you on this case. I said, really? And he knew of two people who are skeptics. One is a UFO investigator whose name I won't mention to spare him the embarrassment, and another one is a skeptic who hovers around like a little moth occasionally. And he had conversations with both, and he called me one Saturday morning and says, look, I don't know how you can talk to these people. They don't know what they're talking about. He said they call themselves investigators and UFO experts. They have no understanding of the process of investigation. They're just making stuff up. And I said, I know that, Joe. So what came of that was about a month or two later, Joe puts everything in writing in a nice article that filled 3 pages, and we have it all on my blog. And basically, he goes through it and he says, look, you don't have to be a professional investigator to go through this evidence and draw the only logical conclusion. It's authentic. It's real. He said, anybody wants to contact me, they can write me and I'll talk to them, get back to them. And he did. He was also interviewed on another show by somebody, and he doesn't have any overflowing respect for so-called UFO experts. And it echoes my own feeling that ufology is basically the least scientifically credible field of endeavor where people claim to be doing research and things like that.
Well, I know there's a lot of politics involved with the UFO phenomena, and I know that the military and the government has classified any UFO or ET material as above top secret code word classified. So a lot of stuff is hidden away, and I know that Project Blue Book, the people that ran it, later came out on video and said it was their job to disinform and hide the truth. So I think you said the magic word here. You said blog. You have a website, you have a blog. We will show the website address at the end of the program, where there's this information that you'll show now.
Tons of information.
And more information.
Right, right.
So stay tuned and keep going.
Sure. Well, you know, just to follow up a bit on that whole thing of UFO investigation, Project Blue Book, et cetera, the disclosure, there's only one thing, in my opinion, left to disclose, and that is the Billy Meier contacts, because they are singularly authentic. And that's the reason that most people don't know about them. So we get to chase lights in the sky. We have various UFO organizations that are actually connected to the intelligence, or like MUFON, which is a kind of shills for the CIA and the State Department. And they vet their information through those agencies. And basically, people that report UFO sightings and stuff to them are doing field research for the secret military.
True.
More than 90-something% of UFOs are terrestrial secret military craft.
Okay, well, I'm anxious to see some pictures.
We should see some photographs taken subsequent to 1964, which was after Billy Meier had lost his left arm. So now he's a one-armed man, and in 1975, 76, he's taking photographs like this, which are unparalleled, unequal to today, until this very day, and probably will continue to be. You can see the construction, the dissimilar metals where they're used, and kind of the various contours and fluting and what have you. Some of them you get to see reflections of trees, reflections of the sky, you know, the environment. And this craft was posed so that it was moved around the tree by the Playaran extraterrestrials. And Billy was a little closer at times and a little farther away at times. But basically, you have here such stunningly clear photos that people often say, well, they're too good to be true. They can't be. But we also actually had the photographs looked at by forestry experts so that they could comment on the trees, not the UFOs. And they said, these are mature, full-grown trees, probably roughly 40 feet high or so. And you're looking at objects, craft that are not made on our world, and that cannot be said about all the, you know, UFO photographs and films or videos that you see these days, especially taken with digital equipment and subject to manipulation and CG effects and what have you. So this is the real deal out in the middle of nowhere in Switzerland, in the boonies. 3 of the craft were filmed. This is a static photo from a film. And those 2 smaller craft were rotating. They were kind of bobbing around, rotating, and then suddenly they disappear from the film frame, and only the craft in the center remains. And here, this is one of two rather amazing photographs. Why, we may ask? Because Billy Meier was in a craft photographing out one of the windows or screens, and there are two other UFOs right there in view. He takes the photos with a 35mm camera. We know the camera, we know the film, we know all of that stuff.
With one arm.
With one arm, indeed. And this is a very famous photo because this is what's known as the sunlight shot. And upon close examination, you can see that there are at least two branches that are in front of the craft. So it rules out a small model being held and suspended close to the camera, because we know with certainty from the great work that Jim Del Toso and other people have done, that's a large object about 23 feet in diameter. And we even have, we're not going to be showing everything tonight, but we have a film clip where Billy and one of the directors from Nippon TV walk up the hill in, it's a spring or summertime when the tree is in full bloom, and you see them standing next to it, how small they are, and so you get a sense of that is one good-sized object, and it's real, and one of the, as I say, one of the more famous of all the photographs.
And they found that tree.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Billy took them right to that spot.
Wow. You get the feeling it's too good to be true.
Well, that's because we're used to things that are too bad to be true. But people believe them because, unfortunately, we have lost our sense of discernment to such a high degree that those things that are basically phantasmagoria, that are basically illusions and manufactured effects, are what capture people's attention. So when people are presented with that which is real, that which is true, they often have no reference point. They don't know how to react except to be suspicious. Yep. And that's a big obstacle, clearly. We do have some other UFO photos in this case that Meier took, and all of the photos that we're seeing now are between 75 and 1981, when this object was photographed on a couple of occasions. There's a total of 64 photographs and one video of this object called the wedding cake UFO. And you see it in different locations here, so to speak. Up. This object is one that's either 14 feet in diameter or 21, 23 feet. Billy was 15 feet away from the craft when he took this photo, 15 feet away. And there has been a skeptic who made a really nice model of it but couldn't duplicate all of the detailed work. And those details included those red light-like crystals set around the ship. There are 100 of those on the rim. The blue and green ones, I think there's a white one. And then you've got inside one of those globes, you've got a blue lens. And if you look at the globe, you see in the background it's a reflection of a building behind Billy when he was photographing this and some other trees. So a whole book has been done also on this. The analysis of the wedding cake UFO, about a 78-page book, where they used today's state-of-the-art technology to show and to analyze and make this presented so people can literally study it from a book, try to duplicate the research, what have you. It's authentic. It's a real large object manufactured in another world. And we not only have these daytime photos of it, we have this photo, which skeptics said, well, that's only a gold model against a black curtain. And, you know, they said this is such an obvious hoax. But that changed once Mr. Zahi, who did the analysis on this, actually took the photo right off the internet, like anybody can do, put it into Photoshop, adjusted contrast and brightness, and voila, we have a large object with an energy field around, especially around the upper part of it. And we also see that it's over a There's a gravel road when we can see a full view of this photo, which is a little difficult, but there's a gravel road. There is a grassy hillside. There's that post, a white post, like a 1 meter post that mark many of the roads in Switzerland. And so suddenly the so-called gold model against the black curtain turns out to be a large object generating energy. Another version of it is right here. Its own energy field is generated, and the skeptics, well, they really didn't have any comeback. The other unusual craft that Meier photographed is called alternately the energy ship or the light ship. And in this case, it looks, people said, well, that's just a trick. You know, it's a double exposure outside of the camera with a fluorescent light. And actually, a friend of mine, a guy I went to high school with, caught up with him 50 years later. He had already been working for Disney and other people in filmmaking, special effects. He said, nope, that's a in-camera triple exposure, accidental. There's no hoaxing involved. This is whatever he was photographing. He clicked the shutter 3 times. And it goes on with the, you know, this photographic evidence is stunning. It's been tested over a period of 40 years, and we simply have got a situation in our hands where Meier not only has more evidence than anybody, he has the best evidence for actual extraterrestrial craft. Nobody's ever come forward showing us that any of this was made on Earth, and clearly it wasn't. I had the wedding cake displayed in Times Square with a press release. I had a deal. They said, oh, if you get the press release, we'll let you display anything you want in Times Square for 15 seconds. I said, show the wedding cake UFO, and so they did. So that's something on the UFOs. There's other evidence as well. There's all sorts of other physical evidence, but it's, I often say to people, once we've gone through all the UFO evidence, okay, you can find out for yourself. You've got expert analyses, you've got expert opinion. You can duplicate testing now because of the tools available on the internet. And once you're satisfied about that, and this sounds strange coming from somebody who's out there for almost 40 years, forget about UFOs. It's the least important part of the whole thing.
Least important part.
Yeah.
Well, I know the first time I saw some of these photos about 10 years ago, I said, okay, this is how they can model this is how they can model that. But I know for absolute fact that there are a number of photos that just cannot be fakes, that they are absolutely real, regardless of what I think. And those alone are enough to substantiate this case.
Actually, the people can make models from Meier's photos and from his films, but what they can't do is they can't trick the camera. When people try to do it, it always comes up, if you would test them, it will show a small object close to the camera and never a large object in the distance.
Agreed. Because
of all of that kind of thing.
Okay, well, what is the larger explanation? Then we have all these wonderful pictures, and the UFO itself is part of it.
Yeah.
But what are the ETs trying to tell us? Why did they contact Meier in the first place?
If we're to kind of condense that down to a couple basic ideas, one overriding statement I usually use is that they have made contact with Meier singularly and solely in order to help us assure our own very threatened future survival. The UFO evidence is not the only evidence that was presented in this case. So if we say, well, let's forget about UFOs for a while, we have a body of work here that, even as of a few years ago, exceeded 26,000 pages.
26,000.
Most is still in German. However, from what's been made available in English, which is, a paltry 5,000 or 6,000 pages maybe, we have already charted over 200 specific examples of prophetically accurate scientific and world event-related information that Meier verifiably published before the events occurred or the discoveries were made.
Prophetic.
Well, yeah, and that's, for scientists who don't like that term, although I can tell you we have all sorts of prophets in our world of varying degrees of accuracy. We call them meteorologists, we call them architects, astrophysicists, sports analysis. Simply means, in these cases, it's people who take known information and project outcomes.
Yes.
Well, the Plejaran extraterrestrials and others in the past connected to them were able to take known information and even as yet unknown information and make projections into the future to project determined outcomes that would occur if we did not change course in time. So the prophecies, according to Meier and the Plejaran, that means events that will happen if we don't alter the circumstances in time. Predictions, on the other hand, set in stone. Those are things that will happen with certainty. They are usually cosmic events, like an incoming object from outer space or the eruption of a volcano that in some way isn't connected to man-made behavior, even though much of it is. So we find that the information of a prophetic nature goes back to when Meier was a young boy. He was 7, 8 years old, even. Actually, the prophecies he was presented were over 72, 73 years ago. So he's only, he's a young boy at that time, 6, 7. And here he is at, about 8 years of age? And he's already been meeting with an extraterrestrial teacher for 3 years. And by that time, he already had the thinking capacity of a 35-year-old man. So this young boy had a mission to fulfill as he would grow up, and his mentors, his extraterrestrial teachers, would help to prepare him for that. Now, I said we've got over these 200 specific examples. They cover a wide range of sciences, topics. But when we speak about helping us assure our very threatened future survival, pardon me, we get to the place of looking at information verifiably published very long ago, from 30 to, quite literally, according to this information, more than 10,000 years ago, by the prophet Enoch and the prophet Jeremiah. This is why, we're tossing these things out for those people who are going to go, can't be so, might be so, it's interesting. Everybody can check out exactly everything I'm stating here. What concerns us now at this time, especially, is in light of the events that have taken place recently with the United States of America launching missiles into Syria, which they called retaliatory strikes. Well, wait a minute. If the American people can think, and I do hope they can think, now they have to try to figure out why we are retaliating against people who haven't done anything to us. And in terms of the Meier material, it's apolitical. They're not on the side of any politics, but their point of view is that America has done nothing for the past at least 100 years and much more, but instigate unprovoked attacks, acts of aggression, by definition, against people who have not done anything to us, mainly to take possession of countries, their rights, meaning mineral rights, resources, etc. And while we have all been thinking that we're raised in a country that really does stand for the wonderful principles that it should stand for, the underbelly, the hidden elements that direct the real policies of this country for a very long time and continue to do so, are pushing us now closer to something that we are warned about in the Billy Meier information. A couple things, in fact. One of which, relating to these attacks against Syria for no reason, that would be a third world war with Russia, and that would mean with Russia and China, and that would mean with Russia, China, and other countries also coming against us. And in this case, what we're warned about is pregnant pause. What we're warned about is that if we do pursue this foolish dead-end path foretold thousands of years ago and brought to Meier in Our country will be thoroughly destroyed from one end to the other, and it's described how and the kind of weaponry that will be used. Even if we say, well, we know the document was written, given to Meier, and published first in 1987, 31 years ago, we didn't know about computer-controlled weapons and AI, laser, biological, chemical. That wasn't really on the table that much. Sure, some places but computer, laser-controlled weapons, that's not being talked about 31 years ago, not certainly openly. And why would a guy living in the middle of nowhere in Switzerland be publishing that and saying the danger is that these automated weapons will become autonomous and turn against their creators as well? This is part of what's in this Billy Meier case. I'd like to go, not only is it, and would it be the most important scientific discovery and event, confirmed existence of extraterrestrials, contact with somebody, we'd have to know the reason for it. And we've just started to address that to help us assure our future survival. And with the specific dangers laid out here, we now are seeing it on television, online, in publications of all sorts. The danger that we are going to provoke Russia into a third world war. And Meier, in recent predictions, has even said more about how this could happen with the help of the EU and NATO from Germany, where they're going to set up and try to provoke Russia more. We will not win this battle. No one will really win it, except Russia and China will do much better than we. We will be a country of complete and total destruction. That probably doesn't sink into people because we've never had bombs rain down on our heads in this country. Russia knows that. The Russian people are long-suffering. They've endured all sorts of politics and war and aggression, and, you know, they are a people. They've got their corruption, they've got all the stuff, but they're much more cohesive. They are a cohesive people, and they are not looking. Russia has never done anything to us. We could say, well, when they were the Soviet Union and communism and the spies here, and all, everybody does that to everybody. We know that, but Russia's never attacked us. So Meier warned specifically in these documents from 31 years ago. Meier warned in a video that we put up a couple years ago on YouTube. It's gotten lots and lots of views saying, don't provoke Putin. He's not looking for war with you. Don't do it. Not because you're going to, you know, screw up Russia so much as what the consequences. And in that video, he speaks about how the average people in America don't have the power anymore to affect the policies that are being rammed down their throats.
Exactly right.
And the other danger we have, which who knows if they're simultaneous or one comes before another, in 1981, he publishes a document and says, the United States of America will have two coming civil wars, one following upon the other, and it cannot be helped, but the country breaks up into 4 or 5 territories under various sectarian dictatorial rule. So I laughed out loud in 1986 or 7 when I read that. What's this? Billy Meier, UFO, but what is he? Civil war in America? Who's laughing now? We see the polarization everywhere. The crazies on this side and the crazies on that side, and everything that's being done in and by the media and players in the government and perhaps people outside who fund, they have agents provocateur. We're in the beginning stages of that. And again, now the news is full of people speaking about civil war. We've been sending this information around for years with the major players paying no attention whatsoever. And to this day, people that are now talking about the very things Meier warns about, they won't refer to Meier's one.
Perhaps you're not aware of the initiatives that are being taken right now to divide California into 2 or more states. And I know that Texas wants to secede from the American Union, and the government responds by saying, if you do, we'll make you a no-fly zone. So they haven't done that. But there is too much conflict. And I like to think of it in terms of a 4th grade playground where you have the one bully that keeps pushing and getting away with it, pushing and get away with it. And eventually they push too hard and something breaks. So how can we interfere such that we do not set off World War III?
Well, that's a very good question, and what you just said too I want to address, because what you described with the pushing, 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 and finally something breaks, everything in life accords with, or is, the operating principle is the law of cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. That is part of what we call the spiritual teaching, which you're actually bringing us to. But I'll just say a little more about it. With the history of all of the covert as well as overt aggression of America, these are all causes that have come from here. They've been initiated from the policy makers in America, again, sometimes hidden from, public view, but who direct policy. Aggression, aggression, aggression. Sooner or later, that comes back to us. The fact that the country has as much illegal immigration going on is an indication that people, not just from south of the border immediately, but people from other countries go, well, these people have come here, they've taken our stuff, well, let's go back over there and have some of it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, and the whole immigration problem was over 70 years ago described to Meier, specifically for Europe and what's happening now. They told him there would be a crazy German woman who would open the floodgates to crime waves through migrants who would come in, many and most actually being basically economic refugees, lots of criminals and all. Sure, some people fleeing legitimately for their lives, but most of it really being a very imbalanced kind of a percentage of people. But you say, well, okay, how do we stop a third world war?
How can we come together and do something?
I think the first thing we have to do, well, there is a mechanism that is always helpful that's been going on for some time. It's called the Salome Peace Meditation. I have more information about that on my website. It's done by many people, well, not many compared to 9 billion, but a few tens of thousands around the earth. But we're told, according to the information in this case, that it's also done by about 3.2 billion human beings, extraterrestrial human beings, on our behalf to try to help to break up the shroud of negativity that encircles this planet, which comes from bad thinking, put it at that. So how do we change that outcome? What they are saying here, the spiritual teaching is a non-religious, belief-free teaching. It's instructional. Just like if you want to learn auto mechanics or electronics or cooking or anything else, mm-hmm. you have information that you are then self-obligated to test out to determine, does this work, how does it work? This is a teaching for human beings, not only in this world, but for right now, that's most important to us, to learn how thinking works and how our thoughts lead to the life, to the world that we see, and hopefully to the world we want to see. Mm-hmm. Thoughts lead to feelings. Feelings lead to thoughts, lead to actions. What we don't know as a species is that we're thinking all the time. We don't know that we're thinking, and most people don't know what they're thinking, right? Every now and then we kind of tap into something. Oh, what was that? I'm thinking about something. What is taught in the spiritual teaching, and this is an extremely ancient, far older than we can imagine. It's the teaching of this creation, this universe, the creation. And it's come with the help, pardon me, of the Plejaren and Meier's own work. We have it now. We have all that we could possibly ever want. And we have a lot of it for free on the website. We have books by Meier. What happens is you start to study and you test, and if my life and the lives of other people I know are any example, you start to notice your life getting better. It just starts to work. And so you enthuse a bit to learn more. And in so doing, you delve in, and by working on ourselves as individuals to have more love and peace and freedom and harmony in our own lives, that is contributing to the love, peace, freedom, and harmony in the world. Like-minded people, people who treasure those values, whether they know about the Meier case or not, start to find each other. That matrix starts to connect up. Blip, blip, the light goes on, and the streaming energy between connects people. Ultimately, that is how our world will heal. Can we stop a third world war? It'd be nice, but at this point, I would suggest to people that you start to study so you can gain your own peace first, so that you can plot your own course and navigate where to be, how to be, what energy to put into the collective consciously. In time, over a great period of time, it will be, according to this, the women, the true mothers of the millennium, who will regain the power, the directional power for life on Earth, that the male energy, you know, which is great energy for certain things, but this rampant aggression and violence, that will be tamed. We will do it also genetically, through genetic remanipulation, engineering, bringing back the proper balance inside ourselves in terms of longevity, in terms of calming down that propensity for violence and aggression. But it will be the women who will ultimately be the peaceful rulers.
Would you say that the first step that anyone could take to move in this direction would be to take responsibility for their own life?
Well, that's the, I love it. That's the first principle.
It is.
In the spiritual teaching.
To be responsible
100% for your own life. Yeah, because that's where it starts. We are not giving it out to imaginary gods, saints, saviors, rabbis, mullahs, preachers, angels, things that are the creation of human beings. We take responsibility ourselves for everything in our lives, and we do the best. Yes, we're in a world where other things go on. We can't control everything, but we must do the best to control our own lives and forge our own destiny, as Meier says each human can. Then, knowing that, we are told in the teaching, we need to see things as they are. Not through a filter of fear, and not through the rosy, glasses of New Age thinking where everything is just marvelous, bat your eyelids at it, it's all going to be just fine. Yeah, because it ain't if we just do that. And so we're taught what's called neutral positive thinking. We first see things as they are, and then through the thinking, because the might of our thoughts is what directs creation in our lives and everything else, we decide whether we are going to perpetuate a path, something we're doing, if we're going to alter it, if we're going to eliminate it, if we're going to increase it because it's good. Not everything we become aware of is bad. It's fine, but we may even be able to make it a little better or just sustain it in its own perfection for as long as we can. So this is such an important part. Those 3 steps alone are among the most important things we can do. And in so doing, we start to piece together our own lives in the best way and start to create the world we want. And it may mean that we'll be doing a lot of repair work for those who did not pay attention and think that the answer is to blow everything up all the time. So reasonableness.
Yes, and for myself, I found that I need to make room, to have room to allow new information to come in to me to look at, without judgment, to allow other thoughts to come in so I could be guided or assisted, so I could be able to better choose between what's bad and what's good.
Right. Well, that's then, if I may say it, that's where your discernment or judgment comes in once you have something present and you're conscious of it. And you are then going to decide, because there are things, whether they're tangible or intangible, which are great on certain circumstances and not great in others. Fire is great, but not if you're in a place where there's a lot of flammable material.
Right.
So we have to have discernment, and we learn how to think and to forge our individual and collective destinies.
Well, from what I see on the internet and on TV, there seems to be a group of people that are dead set against about conquering everybody, steal their oil, so their currency is the best. So how can we alter that situation so that everybody wins, but so we don't have this continuing conflict?
Well, you mentioned something that actually in 2006, I had asked Billy Meier about the Iraq War. Is it fundamentally about oil? And he said, no, it's fundamentally about your dollar. And if things go a certain way, you may as well roll cigarettes with your paper money. Meier, last October, put out a new long list of prophecies and predictions, and one of the things that is coming to the world is a complete global financial crash. So all of these efforts, yes, everything, he says it will be unprecedented. Forget the Depression of '29, it's nothing. He said, what's coming is going to dispossess people everywhere of their belongings. We will find these types of things incomprehensible, except in the months that follow our sitting here. We will watch what happens with the stock market. We'll watch what happens with these attempts to attack and control countries out of this desperation to prop up a dollar that has nothing really behind it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not here to get into all the variations in currency and what have you, but it doesn't go well financially, and that's all part of this problem.
We have about 5 minutes left. One of the problems I see with the Billy Meier case is in UFO groups like MUFON and the various UFO conferences we see around the nation. The Billy Meier case is kind of pushed off to the side as, well, that's old and I don't want to deal with that, or I don't believe it.
Right.
How can we get this more in the forefront, especially these new prophecies?
Well, I would say that the people, your viewers, are the ones who can help the most. And the reason the Meier case is pushed off to the side, it's called the empty room syndrome. And I made that up. It's basically, once any of the so-called UFO experts, not a one of whom know what they're speaking about at all, because they're using third-hand information and reporting mainly on military stuff, despite whatever they may think. Once those people would refer to the Meier case as authentic, as even the director of MUFON, Jan Hartson, admitted to me, he knows the Meier case is real, but didn't want to. It's because the room empties from whatever dead end, chase your tail, chase lights in the sky topics people are speaking about. Once you've got the real thing, you don't need the rest of it. And that means that the UFO industry, which is what it is, goes flat on its face, because it isn't about UFOs, it's about our survival, and that's where you're going to get the information. Right there, the Meier case.
Well, from my point of view, I see a lot of these UFO conferences are useful for entertainment. And people don't want to be responsible, so they don't want to look at something like the Meier case to grasp the real significance and how it affects their life really. They'd rather float along and just be entertained. That's got to change. That's really got to change.
The longer people stay with that information, entertainment, disinformation, the harder it makes them, for them, to come into real life and deal with the real issues of real life, and that's what we're dealing with here.
Okay, I just been given our 2-minute warning.
2-minute warning.
One of the things on your website, I'd just like to read this first sentence. You'll see the website address here in a few moments, so get a pen and pencil ready, please. This is from the Spiritual Teaching, the English translation from the German. Says, the spiritual teaching is the clearest, most insightful and penetrating spiritual teaching to be found, and the key to our future survival. I think that's very profound. And here's the write-up that I found on the website. It's only 1 page long, so I encourage everybody to read it.
It's pretty easy to read.
And you do, when you give talks, you have great information sheets to hand out.
Yeah.
And all of this is available on your website.
Free.
It's free. So if people were to be responsible and wanted to take action to protect their lifestyle, their future, their children's future on a non-radioactive planet, then I suggest they get a pencil and paper and get involved and become responsible.
I answer all email, too, if they write.
Okay, and your email address, I know it's on the website.
Sure.
It may show up here in a moment. But we really thank you for coming out and sharing your information and hanging in there.
My pleasure.
Against the continuing stream of denial sowers.
Yes.
I know we can always find one thing in any case that looks funny. And we want to forget about all the real things that we can't explain away. But it's time to be responsible, take the bull by the horns, say, you cannot duplicate this, therefore this is real.
We can thank our friend Joe in Thailand for that. He closed the door on any kind of a skeptical argument. Yeah.
Okay. Any last thoughts before we go to our credits?
So I'm grateful for this opportunity always, and I really do invite people to view the information, to contact me. I will answer and respond. Give me a little time. It takes me time. But we just want people to find the truth for themselves, and they can determine if this is indeed the truth or not for them.
Well, won't this be scary? Won't everybody laugh at me and they'll try to get at me?
Well, I never worry about it. People can laugh. Let them laugh.
Well, I continually get asked embarrassing questions to them. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm always open for new truths, even though I got a PhD when I was 26. What's in the books is not what's happening.
That's true.
And what's on TV is definitely not what's happening. I found that out. And you're available for tours, I understand?
Well,
people can contact you?
Yeah, I make presentations. I've done, this is the third one here in Northern California. I've done them from Hong Kong to Amsterdam, from Hawaii to Brazil, you know, London and many places. And I'm always glad to do it because anybody that's interested enough, I'm interested to come and speak with them.
This could be a great YouTube website. We'll get you lots of hits and some extra money.
Love it.
If we can. And we're going to have our credits come up in just a moment when our TV program is ready here. Here we go. To further contact Michael, the guest information here is www.theyfly.com. Just like it sounds, theyfly.com. And for further information about our programming here, you can contact us at Space Cities. That's at Post Office Box 487 in Mountain View, California, 94042. Post Office Box 487 in Mountain View, California. And so with that, I think we've put together a very good show, a 1-hour show on the Billy Meier case and why it is so damned important.
Yeah.
And this is not entertainment. This is to take responsibility and find like-minded people, and let's change the outcome of this coming war.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Okay, well, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time here on Space Cities.